Mini episode 1460 of the FDH Lounge is brought to you by Sportsology, delivering unconventional columns and webcasts about sports, TV, music, movies, and more. Follow them on the web at sportsology.com.
The FDH Lounge. You want to schedule your life around it.
A long time ago, on a gloomy, wet Cleveland spring night, two men stand alone amidst the late-night drizzle. Their voices echo across the vacant station parking lot as they debate the merits of the great American radio show that have been missing for far too long. On that night, an idea was born. That idea became the FDH Lounge. Welcome to the FDH Lounge.
You've mentioned that before. The one thing I will say is I'm always sort of leery in trying to get a read on this kind of stuff because long time, FDH Lounge dignitary on the show, Kyle Ross, somebody who has worked extensively in the handicapping biz, had always talked to me about the difference between smart money and public money. So something like that, Chris, that kind of reeks to me of a lot of public money going on the Browns because of a move like that. And that's a thing where I just don't know, because that's a thing where if it's public money, it's meaningless. If it's smart money, then it's very, very, very meaningful. And that's where I draw the distinction, and I just don't know what would drive something like that.
Well, I think it's probably a combination of both, is my guess.
Yeah, it might be. It might be. It's hard to say.
And I think that, you even talk to, you talk to sharps, you talk to the NFL league people. I mean, everybody recognized that the Browns have a Super Bowl quality roster. They just didn't have a Super Bowl quality quarterback. And so you've now fixed the one hole that it had. So I think that both sharps and the public can recognize that, well, okay, this was a really great roster, that despite the failings at the quarterback position and all the issues they had last year, they still won 8 games with the 28th best passing attack. It doesn't take much to realize that, you put in a guy like Watson, whose worst year in terms of passing as a quarterback in his career was better than Baker's best year. How that changes the Browns' talent and the ability to use that talent. So now I will say this: I still think the Browns have some question marks at the wide receiver position.
Sure.
So Cooper's a good step in the right direction. They still have Schwartz and Peoples-Jones, but after that, you're sort of like, okay, what's the next? Now, we're already, again, talking about players want to play with the guy. Fuller's talking about wanting to come here. Jarvis there's talk that he might want to come back. They were in on Robert Woods. He chose to go to the Titans because apparently he wanted to play in Nashville. So it's, they've got to shore that up, obviously, between the draft and maybe one or two other free agents. But, I think that this team is Super Bowl caliber, and when you look at the North, they're probably the favorites in the North again, is my guess.
Robert Woods, who knew that the guy had a Hank Williams Jr. fetish, huh? You learn something new every day. But
I know. Yeah, maybe he loves Tootsies. I don't know.
Maybe. But as far as it goes with Will Fuller, I will say, I mean, that's a guy I've talked about repeatedly on the show here. I know FDH Lounge dignitary John Adams always pops for my reference to that line about the country of Brazil over a period of time. To me, Will Fuller is the wide receiver of the future, and he always will be. I mean, when's the last time that guy stayed healthy for an entire season?
No, I'm with you on it. I'm not enamored with that, but I mean...
they need a deep threat, though. They definitely need a deep threat, and Amari Cooper's not necessarily the guy in that regard. I mean, he can go deep, but he's not going to be... He's not the guy I think of when I think burner. There's definitely a need on that. DPJ, when he gets some more polish, maybe, but, he's still sort of working towards that. I agree with what you're saying about wide receiver and targeting it either in the draft or free agency. I'm guessing draft might be more likely because you're going to be going younger if it's in the draft, and generally speaking, youth and speed sort of go hand in hand. I agree with you there.
I could see a guy like Pickens being there in the second round to grab him.
Yes, and that's possible.
And that's the kind of fit they're looking for.
Yes.
And so I wouldn't be surprised if there's one more free agent, and then a guy like Pickens is drafted, and then they've sort of shored that up.
Yes.
and we're apparently, competing for Hicks at the defensive tackle position. There's talk of some other players, so we just got to wait and see. But if they get Hicks and they re-sign Clowney, now suddenly you feel pretty good about that. And then depending on Landry's situation and or what they do in the draft. I mean, again, this is a Super Bowl roster. The Cincinnati Bengals almost won the Super Bowl last year with a defense that is not as good as ours even. So again, a top offensive line. Conklin comes back healthy. Yes, we degraded the center position slightly, but I think they're comfortable with Harris's progression, and that they just couldn't pay top dollar all the way across that line, so they had to make a hard choice somewhere. So I mean, again, this is a Super Bowl caliber roster. I'll just keep saying.
Defensive line.
And now,
defensive line needs upgrading as well, and I would say kicker. And don't be afraid to draft a kicker because the Bengals.
You and I have banged the table for that.
Yes, repeatedly.
Be willing to get in the 5th round and take a kicker.
Yeah,
just do it, or a 4th.
Yeah, or 4th potentially here.
Think about that. They made this deal for Watson. They gave up 1 pick this year.
Yeah.
1.
Yeah, and
1.
In looking at this, in part because of the draft capital and the ramifications and everything like this, so I'm a little more cautious than you are on the level of upgrade here. As I say, I think a pretty big upgrade on field for the team. Certainly. I mean, you have to be an idiot not to say that. I'm a little more cautious, it seems like, all the way around than you. Let's just do a gut check thing here. Throw out a number on each. On chance of making the playoffs had Baker been in there, chance of making the playoffs with a 6-game suspension for Watson. I'm going to say had Baker still been here, I think with the rest of the roster being in place, the fact that, again, you never know what's going to happen. 1 or 2 of these teams is going to slip on a banana peel when you don't expect it. I'll say as high as a 15% chance of making the playoffs if it was Baker here. If it's a 4 to 6 game suspension for Watson, especially a 6-game suspension, as I said before, I give it to the Ravens over them in a coin flip, so I'll say 45% chance. So 15 if it was Baker, 45% chance with a 6-game Watson suspension. What's your gut check on the numbers for each of those?
I think Baker would have been about a 20% chance.
Oh, 20. You're going higher than me even. That's fascinating. Okay.
I am, because I still, and again, let's say Baker's in the right frame of mind.
Right.
And
good Baker.
He's not bitter, and he doesn't skip the whole off season and everything like that.
Right.
I saw with 2020 what a team that it was properly able to support Baker could do.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think, again, a team that wins 11 games is going to go to the playoffs.
Okay.
So I with playing a 4th place schedule, we probably could have won up to 11 games with Baker. Hell, we won 8 last year, and he was terrible.
Yeah.
I mean, so that's not a huge leap to go, you mean we couldn't squeak out 3 more?
Right.
I think we could have, actually. I would say that.
Okay.
And what I would say is the separation is what Watson gives you once you're in the playoffs. So there's that. And I think with Watson, I think we're looking at probably about if there's a 6-game suspension, I'm going to say it's about a 60 to 65% chance.
Okay.
And I think that's reasonable. Again, I'm going to assume with Jacoby Brissett, there's it's like a 3-3 type of thing to start the season. The other thing is, we don't know the schedule.
Right.
We don't know if we're front loaded. We don't know if we're back loaded. We don't know anything. I mean, what if our first 6 are, the easiest games of the schedule, and we've got Brissett? I don't know. What if 4 of them are at home, and therefore helping that process out? There's just factors we just don't know yet.
Well,
I would think that if we went 3-3, fans would have to understand that that's a success.
With my Roger Goodell cynicism, I'm going to say the first 6 are going to be front-loaded as F.
So the Browns go 0-6.
Yeah. Listen, you don't think Goodell is looking for that after the way the Browns put a kick me sign on the whole disciplinary procedure for the NFL? I mean, the wrath of Roger Goodell shows up in ways big and small, as I've been saying on the show year after year. So,
I guess it remains to be seen. So
right.
I think there are other factors, other teams, other things that are going to sort of trump even if he wants to punish the Browns. But that being said, don't be surprised if they have 2 home games in their first 6 weeks or something like that. So they really stick it to them. And
it's interesting because in different sports, in football, baseball, basketball, I don't know if it's spread to hockey, but in the advanced statistics, they have the whole value over replacement player. I mean, Jacoby Brissett, to me, I think of him at this point in time as replacement player. I mean, he's a guy they signed off the street, quite frankly. So, as far as what he can do with this roster and whatever, I don't know if Case Keenum is a good point of comparison here, because when Case Keenum was in there, he wasn't really going to help you win, but he had a much higher floor. We've talked about this repeatedly on the show here. And so, again, the floor of Brissett, I mean, he's competent. And we'll have to see in the course of those 6 games what just the proficient level of competency gets you.
Yeah, you just need him to right the ship for however long the suspension is. He's just got to, like I said, I think let's assume it's 6. Let's assume it's the first 6. I just need Brissett to go 3-3.
Okay.
And I think they're going to make the playoffs then.
All right. As we start to bring this around full circle here, this is a thing where, and this is somewhat on field, somewhat off field, but we're staying away from the morality side of this, which I'd already decided before we didn't want to really get into besides our initial thoughts, not least of which because you can go on social media and get everyone's thoughts on this, and really nobody at this point has an original point of view on this, pro or con.
Nobody does.
Nobody does. I mean, everything I'm saying, everything you're saying is being said in real time there, and I'm very proud that this show has always tried to tackle things in a different kind of a way. So that's another reason we weren't going to get into that whole can of worms here tonight. But this whole thing here, if this turns into the Hindenburg in the long run here, if this is a bad to worst case scenario as far as what sticks to Watson, this is a situation where, I said this to somebody the other day, and this might sound like a knee-jerk kind of a thing, I do regard Andrew Berry at this point, short though his tenure has been, as a top 5 GM in this league. And I said to somebody the other day, the thing is, he may never work as a GM again after this. I honestly think if this thing turns into the worst case scenario, there's going to be such a stench all the way around. I think there's really necks being stuck out in a lot of different ways here. I know you're a big Andrew Berry guy. I know that it's probably just about impossible for you to fathom such a scenario. But, if the worst comes to pass on this situation here, as great of a GM as he's been, what are the odds that this is his last gig as a GM? Assuming the Browns don't win the Super Bowl first, because winning cures everything. Berry, if it's the worst case scenario and the Browns haven't won the Super Bowl yet, what does his future look like?
First, let me just say that my willingness to give some level of consideration to this deal and not just sort of knee-jerk react against it is because of Andrew Berry. It's not because of the Haslams. It's not because of anybody other than the fact that, as you alluded, I am a big Andrew Berry fan, and I have been, and so I have a lot of faith in him. And I want to believe that we would not have made this move if he was not 100% comfortable with the data points that he had. That said, to your point, if it all blows up and goes sideways and there's more stuff to come out, or I don't know, it comes back around and now there's an indictment, or God only knows. Then yeah, it puts this franchise back 6 years. Jimmy Haslam will pay a guy $250 million for a disaster, and it would certainly wreck Andrew Berry's career for some time. I don't agree with you that he would never work again. I think that he has a lot of fans in this league already that realize this guy is sharp as F. I think there are Eagles fans who wish to God they hadn't let him go back to the Browns, but had gotten rid of Howie instead. I think that the respect shown when they hired his deputy up to Minnesota. There are just, when you talk to people around the league, it's clear when there's scuttlebutt, it's like the opinion of the league about Andrew Berry is extremely high. And so, yeah, if this blows up, there's no doubt that it sort of sets him back, and maybe for 5 years he's sort of out in the wilderness. But at some point, someone's going to say, that guy is really smart. Look at the players he drafted. Look at how he manipulated the cap. Look at his plan, process, all that stuff. We really like it. Let's go in here and give him another chance. Maybe he learned his lesson. And at the end of the day, if it blows up, maybe in the end they just end up blaming the Haslam's, right? I mean, that'd be a convenient scapegoat.
Well,
because God only knows people would believe that. They would go, well, if it was a dumb decision, had to be old Jimma. So, I don't think that it would be a death knell for his career if it went sideways.
Well, I've had some people try to stick it just to the Haslams this past week, and I haven't let them get away with that point of view when they've said that, because I said Andrew Berry was key to making it happen, the way that he came up with all the contractual terms and everything like that. If he wanted out on this thing, when Watson first said no, that would have been it. Andrew Berry, if he wasn't behind the deal, he would have let it die then, even if the Haslams would have been like, can't you still do something else? Andrew Berry was key to executing this deal here. His signature is all over it.
And I agree, and I think that shows the faith that the Haslams have in it. Because I agree with you. If he was absolutely opposed to it, it wouldn't happen.
Yeah, I agree. So for anybody that's out there trying to have it both ways as far as, well, maybe this isn't Andrew Berry's guy. No, this is Andrew Berry's guy, and he's going to rise or fall with what happens with this deal. So are there any...
I agree with that. I think Berry is on board with it, and I think Berry realizes in the current AFC that if he doesn't have a top 10 quarterback, he's got nothing.
Yeah. Well,
and I think and maybe that is a little bit of the desperation of the moment, right? Maybe just the ultra-competitive nature of the AFC creates enough of a pressure point that the Browns went and did something that they wouldn't otherwise have done, potentially.
Well, we'll have to see how it plays out. Any other aspects of this from your point of view on field? Because I think I've touched on everything that was on my mind.
No, I think off the field, I share the concerns of it being a problematic move. I mean, it certainly has a distasteful nature to it. I still want the whole process to play out before we, fully, send the young man up the river on all of it. That being said, that would not wash him clean of being and somehow completely innocent of stuff. I mean, clearly there's a pattern here that needs to be addressed in terms of his behavior, and I don't like it. But at the same time, if you're asking me to analyze it from the on-field standpoint, if you're a Browns fan and you're able to compartmentalize and you're looking at just the on-field component, it's a massive win for the Browns.
Yeah, it is. And, the degree to which, we've gotten into that here tonight, and that not everybody comes down in the same place, because anytime you do anything, even with purely on-field implications, and you put, salary cap and, draft considerations into that as well, nothing is ever purely 100% good or bad on field, or rarely is that ever the case, but it's, how does it come out in the mix here? But I think it is pretty much a pure consensus league-wide. If you're just looking at the on-field of this, it is a massive win and a massive upgrade for the Browns. And how much closer it puts the Browns to the Super Bowl, that's where we can disagree here. And we'll be getting into more discussions of this in the wider framework of the NFL as the year goes on, and as we get to draft time, and then subsequently the start of the 2022 season. So, an excellent discussion, Chris. I think we covered all the different aspects here of what to look for on field with this thing.
No, yeah, I enjoyed it, and my last point on it would be for fans would be to say this: you're not going to get to have your cake and eat it too, in terms of simply saying, "Well, I don't like Watson, and then therefore, but I'm going to root for Nick Chubb and Jarvis Landry." And especially the guys like Jarvis Landry. Let's say Jarvis Landry comes back. Jarvis Landry just told you what he thinks of the situation. So anyone that wants to use this is a morality play. When you have players that are willing and wanting to play alongside Deshaun Watson, it's not just ownership that you get to throw under the bus. If you feel from a moral standpoint that it was wrong, it's going to be your other favorite players as well. It's going to be the Jarvis Landrys and the Nick Chubbs and the John Johnsons who are celebrating it. So I just caution those who sort of want to kind of go both ways in it. Like, Juice is my guy, but I don't like Watson. You're not going to get it both ways because Juice is telling you what he thinks about it. And so is Nick Chubb. And so is any free agent who signed subsequently. So I just sort of caution some fans. You see it on Twitter trying to have it both ways. And it's like, yeah, you're not really going to be able to.
Yeah, I agree completely. And I don't think anybody, team, fandom, or otherwise, is going to have completely clean hands from that perspective here of cheering for this team going forward. That, to my opening statement, is the point at which ownership in the front office has put this team and has put for many people, myself included, that conundrum in front of them. So, but as I say, I'm glad we were able to largely stay away from that aspect of it. Got to it to the extent that it was necessary to get to it, so it's not the elephant in the room, but keeping it on field, which again distinguishes this discussion from what they're doing in other places, which is again what we love to do with this. Thank you very much, Chris, and thank you everybody for tuning in to this mini episode of the FDH Lounge.